finish off our other two algorithms that I would like to present today. Okay. So yeah. So next algorithm that we are going to look after logistic regression is the naive Bayes one. Okay. So it's pretty simpler algorithm, which we have studied a lot of times, knowingly or unknowingly. Okay. In many of our classes, maybe even in +1 and +2. Okay, so naive Bayes algorithm will fundamentally work on the concept of Bayes theorem. So would like to just iterate the basics quickly here. So P of C is the probability of a team winning, let's say, and P of D is the probability of rain in weather forecast. Okay, so what is P of C by D? So you all know if something is called as P of A by B, then probability of the occurrence of A given that B has already occurred. That's what we mean by P of A by B, right? So similarly, P of C by D is nothing but the team will win given that it will rain. Okay, so P of D is nothing but the probability that it will rain. Okay, and P of C by D is that the probability that the team will win given that given that it will actually rain. Okay, so P of C by D is given by P of D by C. Okay, and P of C divided by P of D. So now what is this exactly is like when we are trying to read it, we have to read it like this. Okay, so what is P of D? P of D is that it will rain. Okay, so probability that it will rain given that the team will actually win. Okay, multiplied by probability that the team will win divided by the probability that it will rain. Okay, so in another terms, what do we generally call this particular formula as is that this P of C by D is called as the posterior probability. That means the one that we try to calculate. Okay, so posterior probability, and P of D by C is called as the likelihood that it will rain, or likelihood that we are actually mapping it to a particular class. Okay, so P of D by C is called as the likelihood, and P of C is called as the prior probability. Okay, prior probability in the sense like we know that what is the probability of this particular team winning. Okay, so that it is a prior information that we have. So this is called as a prior probability divided by P of D is nothing but the evidence. Okay, so I can say that this formula is posterior is equals to likelihood into prior divided by evidence. Okay, so this is how we call generally a Bayes theorem. Okay, this is how generally we represent the Bayes theorem. Now, what is our objective function? The objective function is that we would like to have maximum posterior probability, right? Because I'm trying to calculate the probability here. So the probability generally vary between 0 and 1, right? The probability varies between 0 and 1. So higher the probability, higher the chances that the team will win given that it is raining. Okay, so we would like to maximize this, correct? That's what will be our objective in the Bayes theorem. So we want to maximize this. So our objective is we want to maximize the posterior probability. So that's what exactly we are trying to do here. Now in this case, if you see, this is our basic Bayes rule, but we tried dropping the denominator here because the denominator is nothing but the evidence and it is a total probability. So it will be 1. Okay, so it will be a total probability and it will be 1. So we don't need to bother about the denominator. So that's why I'm dropping it. Okay, now you can clearly see here. So the P of D by C, P of C is nothing but, now when we talk with respect to our machine learning model, what will happen is that we have multiple features. Okay, we have multiple features feature set is there. Now that features are represented as x1, x2 and so on and xn given C. Okay, now what is the C? C is that the probability that the team will win. Okay, now what is this particular terminology here indicates that, okay, given this feature is available, given the team will win, okay, what will be the probability of this feature? Similarly, given the team is actually winning, what is the probability of this particular feature? Okay, so what this term try to tell us is that how each and every feature in our data set is actually contributing towards the winning of the team. Okay, so that's what we are trying to figure out here. So one thing that you have to remember very carefully in naive Bayes theorem is that naive Bayes theorem considers each and every feature as an independent feature. Okay, it considers every feature as an independent feature. That is the basic assumption of naive Bayes algorithm in machine learning, and that's what is actually driving the naive Bayes algorithm. Okay, so it's a basic assumption which you have to remember. Why it is taking that kind of an assumption is that the moment you consider each and every feature as an independent one, you know that when the two events are independent in probability, then your P of A intersection B will become P of A into P of B. So you're basically multiplying it. Okay, so the moment you say that this features x1, x2, and so on, xn are actually independent, then I can write this particular formula as P of x1 given C into P of x2 given C into P of x3 given C, and so on. Okay, so now it is basically becoming a formula of an independent event. Okay, now once that is done, now how can I write this formula further is that I can do the same argmax but with a product, now product of P of x given C. Okay, so this is how exactly a naive Bayes algorithm is actually working. So what this formula will convey to us is that given the team is winning, what is the contribution of this feature? Given that the team is winning, what is the contribution of the second feature? Given the team is winning, what is the contribution of the third feature? So like that, how each and every feature are actually contributing towards the winning of the team. That is what exactly we are trying to capture in the naive Bayes algorithm. Okay, so you need to be very careful that naive Bayes algorithm will work based on this assumption that all the features in the dataset are considered as independent features. Okay, so with that understanding, we will see the code of naive Bayes in a couple of minutes, because it's pretty simple, just calling the naive Bayes function alone and doing all pre-processing stuff. Okay, so we'll quickly go to the final algorithm that I thought of discussing with you guys is the k-means clustering algorithm. Okay, so till now what we have seen is basically a regression algorithm, linear regression, and logistic regression is a classification algorithm, and naive Bayes is also a classification algorithm. So how is it basically a classification algorithm? Is based on this particular probability. Okay, based on the probability. So based on the posterior probability that you calculate, you can take a decision whether it is belonging to the class 1 or class 2. Okay, now one of the important applications of naive Bayes algorithm is in spam filtering. I would like to mention it here. So spam filtering is basically the one that you are daily seeing in your email boxes, right? The moment you get a particular mail, sometimes a mail is automatically classified into a spam. So how is it exactly happening is that spam mails are generally having some fancy words in them. Like for example, you won a particular lottery and you have won so and so coupons, or maybe you got a reward of so much this thing, or you may have one money cash prize or something like that. So they use all kinds of fancy words. So how generally spam filtering algorithm works is it will have a data set of all the fancy words that may appear in an email. Okay, so what it does is like whenever you get a mail, it sees are there any words from the fancy words data set, are there any words that are also available in your email. Okay, now what it does is like, let's say if one word is matching, it cannot immediately say that your mail is actually a spam. So it tries to match for second one, it tries to match for third one. So it will see like how much maximum match is happening with respect to its data set and your mail. Okay, now based on that, it will try to calculate a probability model and say that with this much probability, it can say that the mail that you got as a spam or not a spam. Okay, so here you will understand the importance of the feature independence. Okay, see, occurring of one fancy word in your spam email will not decide the result. Okay, so that is independent. Okay, now it checks for the second word whether it is available in your email or not. Now that is also independent. Like that, it will try checking one by one, one by one, one by one. Okay, but as soon as as soon as many words are actually matching with your email that you got, you will see that the probabilities of each word is getting multiplied with the probability of the other word. So as the probability keeps multiplying like this, the overall probability, that means the posterior probability, will increase, and with good probability you will say that your email is actually a spam. Okay, So spam filtering is one of the very, very important examples where naive-Bayes classification is actually applied. Okay. And also I would like to mention that whenever you have some text, okay, text-based classification, when you have a text-based classification model, when you want to train a text-based classification model, naive-Bayes algorithm will work better than other models. Okay. So because this is purely based on the probability, for all the text-based models, naive-Bayes is the one of the best algorithms. Now coming to the K-means classification, K-means clustering. So we all have already seen like how the clustering will happen. So I've just given you a rough diagram here. So what it tries to does is like it tries to take some features like color, shape, and texture and other stuff and all, and tries to put them into different clusters. That is what exactly we are trying to do in a clustering algorithm. Now, how clustering algorithm will work? Okay, there are many clustering algorithms. K-means is one. K-means plus plus algorithm is another one. Agglomerative clustering is another one. Density-based clustering is another one. Okay, so basically, clustering algorithms are divided into three different types. Okay, so the first one is partitional-based clustering. Second one is called as hierarchical clustering. Third one is called as density-based clustering. Okay, so what we are currently seeing is basically the partition-based clustering. Okay, so in partition-based clusterings, these are the three steps that we generally have. Okay, so we have random data points scattered. So what we try to do is like we try to fix upon an initial k value. This k value is nothing but the number of initial centroids. Okay, so we define the number of centroids, randomly pick up the centroids. Now once you pick up the centroid, what you try to do is like you will evaluate your system. Like evaluation in the sense is that you try to assign a cluster value to each of the points in the data. Okay, each of the points in the data. Now once the cluster assignment is done, what you try to do is like you try to take the average of all the points and find a new centroid. Okay, you find a new centroid. So we'll just see a working simple example here. Okay, so let's say I have randomly some points here. Well, what do we do is like, let's say I have decided that I want to go for k value is equals to 3. Okay, then I'll pick up randomly 3 points, k1, k2, k3. I'll assign them as centroids. Once I assign them as centroids, now what will I do is like for each and every point, from each and every point, I will calculate the distance to the centroids. Okay, to k1, to k2, and to k3. Now what is this distance measure? This distance measure is nothing but the Euclidean distance. Okay, Euclidean distance is nothing but square root of x2 minus x1 whole square plus y2 minus y1 whole square. Okay, so I'm trying to take a Euclidean distance. Okay, find a Euclidean distance, and whichever distance is smaller. Let's say for this particular point, I am calculating distance to k1, k2, and k3. But I find that to k1 this point is closer. Then I'll map this particular point to this cluster. Okay. Now similarly, I'll take another point, calculate whether it is closer to K1, K2 or K3. If it is closer to K1, I'll map this to the K1 cluster. Similarly, I'll take this point, I'll find the distances between K1, K2 and K3, and I'll find that this point is actually closer to K2, so I'll map it to K2. Like that, for each and every point, we try to assign a cluster value. Once the cluster value is done, you can see the output here. Okay, so these are all the points which are belonging to this cluster. These are all the points which are belonging to the K1. These are all the points which are belonging to K3. Now here we don't stop our algorithm. So what do we do further? What we do further is that we take the average of all the X values here and average of all the Y values. That means X1, X2 plus X3 plus so on, Xn of this particular cluster divided by the total number of points. Similarly for Y also. So we take the average of X, we take the average of Y, we get some X and Y average, right? So we take that particular point as the next centroid. Okay, we take that particular point as the next centroid. Now similarly here also we do the same thing. Okay, here also we do the same thing. We take the average of X and Y and move your centroid to that particular new X and Y. Similarly here also. Okay, so that's the reason I have given here. There are 3 steps. First one is picking up the random cluster, random centroids. Then you have to assign a cluster to each and every data point based on the Euclidean distance. Now once that is done, we need to move the centroid. Okay, so once you move the centroid, what do you do again? You do the same process what you have done here again here. That means you take each and every point, see to which cluster it belongs to by calculating the Euclidean distance. So now there are chances that some points which are misclassified earlier or misclustered, not clustered properly earlier, might be clustered to the proper one in the second iteration. Okay, so there are chances that some points may move from one segment to another segment and one cluster to another cluster. Those things can happen. Okay, now you need to keep iterating this particular process multiple times. Now you can ask me a question like, okay, when to stop the algorithm? Okay, so when do we stop the algorithm is that when there is no change in the centroid. Okay, when there is no change in the centroid. For example, let's say in fifth iteration, I calculated a new centroid. Okay, and I'm calculating a new centroid in the sixth iteration also, and both the centroids are actually same. That means the value of the centroid has not changed from the previous iteration. In that case, I can stop the clustering algorithm. Okay, so every k-means clustering algorithm will have majorly two parameters. One thing is the k, that means how many number of clusters have to be taken. Second thing is the number of iterations, how many times it has to be iterated. Okay, so generally the iterations will converge. Okay, generally the iterations will converge, right? A convergence in the sense the cluster is going to be final and the centroids are not going to be changed. So then at that time you can actually stop your clustering algorithm. Okay, now one of the important topic here is that how do you decide on the value of k? Okay, how do you decide on the value of k? So for example, so if I have only two clusters here, maybe if I have only k1 and k2, there are high chances that this complete thing will form a cluster and all these points will form another cluster with k1. Okay, so that is also a solution, right? And I can even have only a single point, single centroid, maybe at center, and I'll call that all these data points are actually falling into the same cluster. Then there is no point. Okay, because all the points I'm saying that they all belong to the same cluster. Okay, or what I can do further is that I can increase the number of clusters, right? I can increase the number of clusters. Let's say I'll put another cluster point here. Okay, I'll put another cluster point here. I may put another cluster point here. Like that, I may increase the number of centroids. Then I will have more number of clusters. Okay, I'll have more number of clusters. Now, how do we decide which particular k value I have to take? That means how many clusters we have to take for a given data set. Okay, now that is a little tricky topic. Okay, that is generally done based on the trial and error basis. Okay, you have to try out your k values between a range and see for which particular k value you are getting good clusters. Okay, now how do you define whether it is a good cluster or not is based on can be done based on one parameter called as sum of the squared errors. Okay, so what is the sum of the squared error? Sum of the squared error is nothing but the difference between this point and the centroid. Okay, the difference between this point and the centroid square plus difference between this point and the centroid squared plus so on. Okay, so you are basically taking the sum of the squared errors. Okay, the squared error is nothing but difference between this point and the centroid. Similarly, difference between this point and the centroid, you have to square them. You have to square them is basically the reason that you need to find the magnitude, not the sign, whether it is positive or negative. Okay, so squaring will allow you to obtain a magnitude. Now you sum all that errors, you will find the summation of that error. Okay, so SSC, it is called as SSC, sum of the squared errors. So that is one parameter based on which you can evaluate whether your cluster is actually good or not. Okay, and also in certain cases you may have to manually verify whether for which particular k value you are getting good clustering. Okay, so it is basically a trial and error method, but it is not just that. We can also do something called as an elbow method. Okay, this elbow method will allow us to identify for which value of k we got minimal sum of the squared errors. Okay, we got minimal SSC. Okay, So how do we do that? So what I have done here is like I have just shown you a simple demonstration. Let's say I have only 2 clusters here. So how do we calculate the sum of the squared error? Is that, see, SSE1 is sum of the squared errors in cluster 1. SSE2 is sum of the squared error in cluster 2. Okay. So how do we calculate the error? Is that, like I said, you take the difference of this point to the centroid, square it. Similarly, you take the distance from this point to the centroid, square it, and you sum all the errors. Okay, you sum up all the errors. That will become your sum of the squared errors for the cluster 1. Similarly, you calculate it for the other clusters also, right? Now, what is your total sum of the squared errors? Is the summation of this one and this one. Okay, so when you have only 2 clusters, your SSE will be SSE1 plus SSE2. Let's say you have 3 clusters, then your SSE will be SSE1 plus SSE2 plus SSE3. So like that, here the general formula I have given is SSE is equals to summation of this SSE to the K. Okay, so if you have K clusters, you have to add all the sum of the squared errors to get the total error. Okay, now what is this elbow method? This elbow method is when you have a single cluster. So on the x-axis, we take the number of clusters that we have taken, and on the y-axis, we calculate the SSE. Okay. So when you have only a single cluster, that means k is equals to 1. What do you mean by k is equals to 1? That means all the data points here are actually mapped to only a single centroid. Okay. That means all the points here are actually under a single cluster, which is actually not a correct one, right? That means when you calculate some of the squared errors, the error will be like very high. Okay. So you can see that when you have S is equals to 1, I mean k equal to 1, only a single cluster, the error is very high. When you have 2 clusters, when you have taken it as 2 clusters, when you have taken it as 2 clusters like this, what will happen? SSE will be SSE1 plus SSE2. So you're trying to calculate this and sum it up. Then your error, total error will become a little more better. Okay, a little more better. Now, when you go for k equals to 3, your error has become a little more better. What do you mean by k equals to 3? That means SSE will be SSE1 plus SSE2 plus SSE3 for 3 clusters. Okay, so you will get a better error. And for 4, you got another error. For 5, you got another error. For 6, you got another error. So as you keep increasing the number of clusters, okay, as you keep increasing the number of clusters, what will happen? So let's say in this graph, there are only 11 points. Okay, there are only 11 points. Now I vary my k from 1 to 11. Okay, 1 in the sense all the 11 points are considered as a single cluster. When k is equals to 11, it means that each and every point is an independent cluster. Okay, each and every point forms its own independent cluster. So please understand, when k is equals to 11 and you have only 11 points here, that means each and every point is actually treated as an independent cluster. When each and every point is an independent cluster, the error is actually 0 because there is no sum of the squared errors there. Okay, centroid itself is the point and there is no distance between them, so the error will be actually 0. Okay, so that's what exactly happened here. Okay, so as you keep increasing the number of clusters, and when your number of clusters and the number of points in the data set are becoming equal, then each and every point will be acting as its own center, as its own cluster, and the error will be 0. Okay, so why do we call this as an elbow technique? Is that when you plot such a curve, it looks just like a human hand. Okay, it just looks like a human hand, and the elbow is the point where your error is no more going down drastically, but it's a linear drop. Okay, you can see that here the change of error from here to here and here to here is like very drastic. It's almost like more than exponential. Okay, it's exponential actually, right? So but after this particular point, you can see that the error is actually going down in a linear fashion. Okay, so this is the point which looks like an elbow, and that point, how did you get that error, is at what k you have to find out. So for this particular data, k is equals to 4. That means having four clusters is actually an optimal solution. That is how you can actually decide what could be the k value in a k-means clustering algorithm. Okay, so This elbow method will generally allow you to understand quickly what could be the possible k value that can give me a better result. Okay, so again, this k value is also now I mean the elbow method is also dependent on the some of the squared errors. So at each and every iteration you may have to calculate the error and see which one is giving you a better result. Okay, so this is one of the very important topics in our k-means clustering algorithm. Okay, so I hope this has given you a good understanding on like how k-means clustering algorithm is working, how to define centroids, when a k-means algorithm will converge, when there are no centroid, I mean when there is no centroid change. Okay, and apart from that, how do you evaluate a cluster is based on the sum of the squared errors. And elbow method is one technique which will allow you to decide what will be the approximate k value for your algorithm. Okay, so with that understanding, we will quickly go through the code. Okay, so I'll quickly go through the naive Bayes code first. So again, on naive Bayes also I have applied the Titanic dataset. Okay, so most of the code remains same except a few things. So initially I'm reading the both datasets, training and testing data here. Now once that is done, I'm finding out what are all the columns available. Now I'm also finding out like which are all the which are all having null values. Okay, so this is all remains same as what we have seen earlier in logistic regression. So the only thing that I have done here is that this is where you can see the change. Okay, this is where you can see the change. So instead of calling the logistic regression part, okay, instead of calling the logistic regression part, I have called a Gaussian naive Bayes. Okay, I've called a naive Bayes algorithm, which is called as a Gaussian naive Bayes here. Okay, so I've called the Gaussian naive Bayes and I have predicted like what is the accuracy percentage. Okay, so you can see that when I have called Gaussian naive Bayes algorithm here, you can see the accuracy as 79.7. Okay, whereas when we have done it with the logistic regression, it was around 81 point something. Okay, so the accuracy is actually dropped. Okay, accuracy is actually dropped. So now there can be a question like, given a data set, like how do I find which algorithm is performing better? Okay, so there is no straight away answer to that. Okay, what you have to do is like you need to try out, practice, understand which algorithm works best on what kind of data. Okay, which algorithm works best on what kind of data. Now depending on your understanding, you have to apply multiple algorithms and try out what is the accuracy percentage that you are getting, and based on that you can take a call like which algorithm has performed better on your dataset. So in machine learning we generally have something called as a no free lunch theorem. Okay, it sounds crazy, but what no free lunch theorem says is that we don't have a single machine learning model that will work for all kinds of data sets. Okay, this is very important, right? We don't have a single machine learning model that will work for all kinds of data sets. So as your data set keeps changing, okay, one algorithm might give you a better result. The same algorithm might not give you a better result on another data set. Okay, so for any data set, it is always recommendable that you need to try out different algorithms and see which algorithm is actually giving you a better result. Okay, but you need not do it blindly. We can always look into some of the statistics and history that we have and see like which algorithms will perform on what kind of data and what kind of distribution of data. So if you have some prior knowledge on those things, it will be easy for you to understand like how you can actually apply which algorithm on which data set. Okay, so that's all I would like to show you in the naive Bayes. It's just a straight call to the Gaussian naive Bayes. Now coming to the k-means clustering algorithm. So I would like to show you two things here. So one is the simple k-means. Okay, so what I have done here is like I have a data set called as income. So it is having only few data like this: name, age, and income. Okay, so I tried putting a scatter plot. And then see like you can see that the scatter plot is like quite visible here. This is a simple one. So seeing this itself, you will understand that okay, this is a cluster, this is a different cluster, and this is a different cluster, right? Now, how do we call the k-means cluster? So km is equals to k-means. So where is this k-means coming from? The k-means is coming actually from sklearn cluster package. Okay, so While calling the k-means, you also have to pass the parameters like how many number of clusters you want to make. Okay, so looking at the scatter plot, sometimes we can come to a conclusion that okay, there might be 3 clusters, so I can directly say that there are 3. Okay, but sometimes the data set may not be like this. It might be something scrambled. Then in that case, you may have to try out with different clusters. Okay, now once this is done, what I'm trying to do is like I'm trying to predict in the sense here nothing but assigning a cluster value to each of the data. Okay, assigning a cluster value to each of the data. So what I did is I did y predicted. So fit predict of on the age and income, I'm just passing it, and I'm trying to predict what is the cluster value. So you can see that 0 is one cluster, okay, and 1 is another cluster, and 2 is another cluster. So in this particular data set, you can see for the first one, it has assigned 1 as the cluster. For the second one, it has assigned the 1 as the cluster. For the third item, it has assigned 2 as the cluster, and so on. Okay, so each one of the numbers is actually the cluster value for each of the records in the data set. Okay, now once that is done, what I have done is I have displayed the same thing here. Okay, so we got the clusters, right? We got the clusters from the y predicted. So I just put another column in the data set, which is called as cluster, and I've given you the cluster label. So you can see that the first one is belonging to the cluster 1, second one to the cluster 1, third one to the cluster 2, and so on, right? And if you want to know what are the centroids of the cluster, you can just do it using the cluster centers. Okay, and this will give you the centroids. So these x and y values of each and every centroid. Okay, now what if I want to give a different color and I also want to plot the centroids? Okay, so for that, what I have done is like I have plotted the scatter plot. Okay, I plotted the scatter plot. So plt.scatter, first one what I have taken is the df1. Df1 is nothing but the cluster 0. Okay, so income with respect to the age, right? So I'm taking the income from that and age. So this is my x and this is my y, and color green. So this is my cluster 0 that is plotted between age and income. Okay, now similarly I'm doing it between the age and income and color red. This is on df2. Df2 is nothing but cluster 1. Similarly df3 is nothing but cluster 2. So I have 3 clusters plotted here. Now once I plotted 3 clusters, what I have done is I have also plotted the centroids in the purple, and the marker was star. So you can see that here this is the centroid, and here this is the centroid, and here this is the another centroid. Okay, now you can see here clearly that there are some points like for example these 2 points. These 2 points are ideally supposed to belong to this cluster, but they are misclassified into this cluster. Okay, they are misclassified into this cluster. So why did it happen is basically because we have not did a scaling. Okay, we have not did a scaling. So what you can do further is that you can actually take scalar, min-max scalar, try scaling it up. Okay, so what I have done is I have put age and income, both of them I have given it to the scalar function. So instead of a large number, if you see here, see, look at the age is in a double digit and income is in some 5 or 6 digits. Okay, so there is a huge variance, right? Huge variance is there. So it is not always a good idea to plot clusters like that, because your values will change. Your values are too large, right? Correct, because you can see that the centroids are also having like higher value. You can see the scale also here. The scale is like no, some 16 lakhs, I guess, right? So it's like too large, right? So instead of doing that, what you can do further is like you can scale it up using the min-max scalar, put it into a number range by normalizing it. So I did a scalar.fit function on both income and age so that I'll get the values like this. Now, once you do that, if you try plotting and if you try doing the clustering again, okay, the same thing I have repeated again. Now you can see that the cluster centers, what I got now, are smaller values, okay, are smaller values. Whereas here the cluster centers, what I got are like very large values. It is in 10 powers, right? Okay, so I got a better centers here. I got better centers here. And now when I plotted again on this data, you can see that this is properly clustered. This is also properly clustered. And this one is also properly clustered. Okay. Now, by the way, here I'm just mentioning the clusters alone. If you want, you can also mention the number of iterations. Okay, that is also possible. But for that, you may have to take a look at the definition of k-means, like, and what are all the parameters that it will accept. Okay. So you can clearly see that this is my good properly done cluster. This is also again properly done cluster. So now the clustering is actually seems to be like very good because we have done the min-max scale. Okay. Now how to go for an elbow plot. Okay. So what I have done here is like, first we need to decide on what is the k range. Okay. Between what k values. So my x-axis is 1 to 9. Okay. So that's why I'm iterating it on 1 to 10 range. Okay. So in a for loop, what I have done is I have called the same k-means function for k equals to 1, k equals to 2, k equals to 3, k equals to 4, so on till k equals to 9. Okay. I'm calling the same k-means function for different number of clusters. And I'm trying to fit it between age and income. Okay. Now, what is this append km.inertia? Km.inertia will tell us like what is the error that we try to calculate, the SSE error. Okay. So it will calculate the error. This is a function available readily in sklearn. So it will calculate the error and it will put it in this particular list. Okay. So now once I got all the errors for each of the clusters. So for cluster 1, I calculated the error. For cluster 2, I calculated the error and so on. So once I got that, I did a plot between k range, that means the clusters, and the SSE that is obtained. Okay. So now here in this particular case, I can see that at k is equals to 3, I find an elbow here. So optimal k value for this particular example is k is equals to 3. So that's all. Hope this has given you a good idea on like how k-means clustering algorithm will work, and how min-max normalization or any kind of normalization technique is also important while you're doing clustering, and how to calculate some of the squared errors and use the same in order to have an elbow plot, so that it can quickly tell us like what will be the appropriate or estimate of the k value. Okay, how many number of clusters we may have to take. Okay, so with that, my session is done. So what I would like you to do is like, please leave me a feedback. So references are these things. Okay, I refer to a lot of material online and offline. So these are different resources. I would like you to leave a feedback at this particular forum. Okay, I'll be putting it in your chat box. Okay. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we have come to an end of this particular web series. People who are having some questions, please stay back. We'll connect in a minute again. Thank you. Thank you a lot.